Good evening to those who are joining us. I'd like to introduce Laura Campbell. And Laura, would you like to record?
Yes, I would.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for the Attorney General Forum. We are very grateful that the four of you could join us. We think we have a great, robust candidates, and we're really excited that what the future holds for us. My name's Ann Engelhardt. I'm the Hendricks County Chairman, and my co-host is...
I'm Laura Campbell. I chair the Hamilton County Republican Party, and we have 116 delegates who will be voting in this virtual state convention.
Yep. And in Hendricks County, we have 59. So a nice assortment and of delegates, and we're just hoping this is a great opportunity for you to be able to reach out to them. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the instructions just for the viewer so they understand. We will start out with introductions, and introductions are for 90 seconds. And we are asking you to tell us about yourself, also tell us about your educational, professional experience in previous public service, and how you are qualified for this position. Also, if you could share a strength and a weakness, and how you work with your weakness to be a leader and manage your how you would use that in your office. We will start alphabetical. Sorry, I can't figure out who is making that noise to mute. We will then go into 7 questions, and we will go alphabetical order with each question. And then we will stop after 1 hour because it can get kind of long, and we want it to be very interesting to our viewers, and we really just want this to be helpful to our delegates. So with that, we'll start with introductions, and we'll start with Mr. Harder. If you could please go first. And if any of you need us to repeat any of these questions, please don't hesitate, because they are a little long. They were written by judges and prosecutors, after all.
Understood. And Laura, thank you so much, and to your delegates and those folks tuning in across Hamilton and Hendricks County, thank you for tuning in to listen. My name is Nate Harder. I am the Decatur County Prosecuting Attorney. I'm also the GOP Chairman for Decatur County and Vice Chairman for the 6th District, which puts me on the State Central Committee. I'm from Decatur County, raised in Greensburg, Indiana, K through 12. Did my sports and extracurriculars here. Was awarded a Lilly Scholarship that paid for me to go to Butler University in Indianapolis, which I would not have been able to do without this community blessing me with that. After Butler, I went to law school down in Bloomington and enjoyed all of the extracurriculars, and especially the courtroom-based ones. Moot court, mock trial, chaired our chapter of the Federalist Society, the conservative student group there, before coming home and beginning to practice in private with another lawyer here in Greensburg, and did that for a little while before I was asked to run for prosecuting attorney, and was ultimately elected over a pretty reputable Democrat here at the age of 26. I've been reelected and have been doing that ever since. And you were asking about strengths and weaknesses. I would say that they are both the same. That I would say is my age. And one of the nice things about being young is that I know the things I don't know, and that I need to seek out people who can help advise me, and surround myself with good people, and try to inject the office with energy, and also with the reforms that are needed to make it function well.
Excellent, thank you. Attorney General Hill, you're next.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for having this. Thank you, Laura, as well. My name is Curtis Hill. I'm the current Attorney General, the 43rd elected Attorney General for the state of Indiana. I'm very proud to serve in that capacity. I'm originally from Elkhart, Indiana, where I still live with my wife, Teresa, and our 5 children. Grew up there, went to Indiana University School of Law. Prior to that, I was at the Indiana University School of Business. From there, I went back to my hometown. I was very proud to go back and spend that time with my mother and father, who put me through school. And I opened up a private law practice and practiced law in Elkhart for about 14 years. successful practice. I ran for prosecuting attorney in 2002 and won that office by 78% of the vote. I then proceeded to be reelected on 4 occasions. As a prosecuting attorney, I was not only running one of the state's largest prosecuting offices, but I also tried a number of cases, murder cases, drug cases, child abuse cases, and gained a reputation as a spirited and very experienced trial lawyer. I ran for Attorney General because it's important to me that we defend freedom and protect families. And for the last 3.5 years, I've served in that capacity. I'm very pleased to be here today. I think we've established the fact that I am a proven winner, a proven conservative, and that I stand strong for the values that we face here in Indiana. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Rokita, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Laura, for organizing this. I think it's excellent that in all that's going on, that we can still exercise our rights under our Constitution, even if virtually, to make sure that we elect the best Attorney General nominee possible and then elect him this fall. As our next Attorney General, I will bring certainty in times of uncertainty. I will uphold the rule of law and, importantly, make sure the office has dignity. As Secretary of State, I created the Prosecution Assistance Unit and aggressively pursued those who committed financial fraud against Hoosiers. And under my watch, my team and I handed out over 300 years of jail time. We'll continue bringing that culture over to the Attorney General's office. I led the nationwide conservative charge against voter fraud, successfully implementing the nation's first voter ID law with the help of many of precinct committee men and women. We took that case all the way to the Supreme Court and we won. And now 30 states enjoy that very same protection. We need to make sure that continues as we get an onslaught from the liberals across the nation. To protect our economy, I fought out of control red tape and taxes. I'm the only candidate to earn the NFIB's Guardian of Small Business Award, and I won it multiple times. As your Attorney General, I will take on China, and you can take on China from this office, and I have experience in doing so. And I will help defend and protect our president. Liberals try to use the courts to bring down the president's agenda, and if they can do it to him, they'll do it to the rest of us. Thank you for your support.
Yes. Thank you. And Mr. Westerkamp, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm John Westerkamp. Laura and Ann, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, even though we can't be in person right now. I'm a pro-life private sector conservative with real world experience. I've been a lifelong Hoosier, a lifelong Republican, and a lifelong conservative. I grew up in Greenwood on the South Side, went to Greenwood High School there and went to Purdue, studied management, got a master's in finance from Purdue, went to IU Bloomington for law school. I work in private practice representing small and medium-sized businesses, family-run businesses, and churches. I've seen the effect of government overreach on my clients. And as Attorney General, I will fight for all Hoosiers' rights, the freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to life. I want to make sure that the office is prepared to handle every legal battle that it has, that it faces in Indiana. I want to make sure we improve transparency and reduce spending and fight government overreach. I'm John Westerkamp, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, all of you. So we will now start with Mr. Hill, and then we will go in the same order. So Attorney Hill, if you're reelected in the situation as Attorney General, how would you organize the Attorney General's office moving forward? Would it include significant restructuring of the offices or a continuation of the current organizational structure and course of operation? Please explain why this would be your approach. And you have 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. The Office of the Attorney General has been very successful over the course of the last 3.5 years. So our reorganization from my election in 2016 has been just that, very successful. So we would do more of the same. It's a very large office, over 400 people, about approximately 400 people, over a multitude of divisions. We would organize as we are now with an executive team that oversees much of the administrative action. And then we have chief counsels in place to direct the general traffic. Based upon the organizations that we have established, we've seen a record response in terms of litigation action. Also from our SG division, we've had amazing victories within the Supreme Court. So we would continue the path that we have started, which has established the AG's office as the most conservative, the most pro-life office in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Rokita, if elected Attorney General, how would you organize the Attorney General's office moving forward? How would it conclude a significant restructuring of the office or a continuation of the current organizational structure and course of operation? Please explain why this would be your approach.
So thank you. So the structure of the office is dictated a lot by statute. There are things that the office statutorily does and things that it doesn't do. So I would reorganize the office culturally, and that is to communicate better. I've been talking to prosecutors now for several months about the lack of communication in different units. Now, there are some very good people over at the Attorney General's office. I worked with a lot when I was Secretary of State, and they help with, for example, with the photo ID case. But there are other places where you need improvement, and there's significant opportunity now, especially when you look at the patient abuse and neglect unit, the Medicaid fraud control unit. With everything going on with the coronavirus, there's amazing opportunity to provide prosecutors help through communication. And we prided ourselves in the Secretary of State's office with the Prosecution Assistance Unit on that communication, meeting prosecutors where they were on different cases, not a cookie cutter approach. And I'd make sure that those prosecutors had the assistance they needed.
All right, great, thank you. Mr. Westerkamp, if you're elected as Attorney General, how would you organize the office moving forward? Would it include significant restructuring of the office or continuation of the current organizational structure and course of operation? Please explain why this would be your approach.
The foundation of my practice in the private practice of law is that the client comes first, and the culture that I want to instill throughout the Attorney General's office is that we come second, the client comes first. The client is the state of Indiana, and we have to make sure that every constituent in state government and Hoosiers across the state are well served. From a structural perspective, right now with the coronavirus going on, I believe that there's going to be an increase in the number of fraud cases and scams and other issues like that will affect Hoosier seniors and the elderly. And we need to be sure that the consumer protection part of the office has the resources that it needs to address the issues that are arising from the coronavirus. And so I would make sure that we do that appropriately.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Harder.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would like to make sure that we do in the future is somewhat new to government, perhaps. We have a habit of promoting people to supervisory roles because we want to hang on to them and they're talented lawyers. We don't want them leaving for other jobs, but they may not be great bosses or leaders. And so I want to make sure that we have a mechanism, a slot in the system for promoting really good attorneys to let them keep doing the good work that we hired them for and that we want to keep them to do, but maybe make sure that they are not focused on administering or leading a division when that's not what they're cut out for. So right sizing and directing and deploying our human resources and our human capital will be one of the priorities that I want to take. The other that I'd like to highlight is I'm used to, as prosecuting attorney, having the state of Indiana as a client, which a lot of times means I get to do what I want, what I think is the right thing. And it will be very interesting threading the needle between continuing to represent the state, a fictitious legal entity, while also recognizing the importance of the client, the executive agencies that we frequently represent.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I will hand this over to Laura.
Thank you, Anne. For the next question, we will start with Mr. Rokita. And the question is, as Attorney General, how would you handle a situation where you disagree with either a local prosecuting attorney regarding an appeal in a criminal case or with a department director of a state agency you are representing regarding litigation strategy in a civil matter? Again, Mr. Rokita.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. First of all, like I said in my earlier response, you have to have a culture at that office of service and recognizing who your client is. Now, when it comes to tactics and strategy, you have to get that worked out. There's no sense in being on a different page than your client is. And so I am confident, given the experience I've had as your Secretary of State and working with prosecutors across the state on financial crimes, that we can get that done. If you look at the statute that we helped write and implement, you see that we meet prosecutors where they are. We can either do the investigation. We were able to do the investigation form, sit second chair with them, or even take the whole trial, depending on what their workload was, what their expertise was. So I would rely on the expertise, which is different from prosecutor's office to prosecutor's office in discussing that. And there are criminal appeals that by statute we must take. There are other rulings during a trial that we have some discretion, but I would be working with them to uphold the rule of law, certainly when it comes to pro-life, certainly when it comes to Second Amendment, but all the various and sundry issues that come in between that.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Westerkamp, same question.
Yeah. So Abraham Lincoln said that a lawyer's stock in trade is his time and his judgment. And every client in the Attorney General's office that I serve will have both of mine. I've learned early in my career that you cannot control your clients. You're responsible for your best judgment. I will make sure that every person that comes to me asking for legal advice will do just that. My judgment will be based on the law and the text of the law. We're not going to be making this up as we go along, like a lot of liberal lawyers that believe the law is this ever-changing thing, a living constitutionalism. I'm an originalist. I believe the law says what it means, and I will give my best judgment to every client that comes to me for legal advice, just like I do in my own practice. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Harder.
So this all comes down to relationships. This is all about being able to walk down the hall or across the government center complex to find the person that you're having this disagreement with and to actually talk to them, to make your case and to talk this out. That is one of the prerogatives of the Attorney General. Frankly, most of these matters are going to be dealt with down the line with Deputy Attorneys General who I've hired to do the work and be professionals every day. It's going to be pretty rare that there's going to be a policy matter of such importance that it climbs all the way up to meriting the time of the Attorney General. But when that happens, that is a point where communication and teamwork and collaboration is going to be at a premium. And so I intend to spend my time developing those reputations and for being a good faith, honest broker in policy disagreements, and also in working together with those policymakers to share my concerns and forge a path forward.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Hill.
Well, having served as a prosecuting attorney, I saw this issue on a first-hand basis on a regular basis. Prosecuting attorneys have a responsibility with regard to appeals that affect their community. The Attorney General has a responsibility to the client prosecuting attorney, but also a greater responsibility to the statewide community to make sure that that appellate process does not impact the ongoing nature of the law in that area. So there can sometimes be a friction or a confliction in those processes. It is a matter of communication. One of the things that we've done as in my Attorney General's office is we have ramped up the level of communication between the prosecutors and the Attorney General's office to make sure that our people at the AG's office reach out to those who've tried the case so that we can understand the case from their perspective and they can understand it from ours so that we can accommodate each other and move towards a smooth resolution in the best interest of the state and in keeping with the Constitution.
All right, thank you. And I'll turn it back to Ann.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to start with Mr. Westerkamp now. And as Attorney General, how aggressive would you be in pursuing criminal appeals? Please explain why you would take this approach and what is the advantage of this approach over a more or less aggressive approach?
Yeah, I start and I end my analysis with the law and the rules of professional conduct and ethics for government lawyers says that we're supposed to do justice as prosecutors. And as you know, the Attorney General handles criminal appeals. Usually it has to do with the sufficiency of the evidence or an abuse of discretion of the sentencing guidelines at the trial court level. I worked with Judge May at the Indiana Court of Appeals and handled cases like that for her. As Attorney General, like I said, I would make sure that the law is my guide here, and that criminals that are convicted of crimes, they have to go to jail, and the state has to be represented. I will represent the state zealously in defending the law.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. Mr. Harder, I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
Do I need to repeat the question?
I think I'm good.
Okay, great, thank you.
So one of the first things that I did when I became prosecuting attorney was review each of the divisions that worked for me to see what was going well and what wasn't going well. Because frankly, the old saying's true, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I have been exceedingly happy with the work of Andrew Kobe and all of the other people in the criminal appeals division the entire time I've been prosecutor, with their communication with me, with pursuing the appeals that needed to be appealed, even with the temperament and tone with which they sometimes smacked around some of the arguments made on appeal. That is one of the divisions that is already doing incredibly good work on behalf of Hoosiers across the state, and I don't see that a change in approach is necessary in that division. And so I don't want to go changing things that don't need to be changed.
Great. Thank you so much. Attorney General Hill.
Thank you. Well, as I indicated, one of the things that we did firsthand was to make sure that our deputy attorney generals worked directly with prosecutors on the appellate process so that they do understand what the nature of the case is and can handle the appeal from an effective standpoint. We're very proud of that accomplishment. The prosecutor's job is to keep their community safe and to lock up people who need to be locked up. Our responsibility in the AG's office is to continue that process and make sure that those convictions are protected and upheld. Certainly, if we find areas where things are out of whack or inappropriate, we make that known to the prosecutors and we move forward, because justice is about making sure that the right result takes place. But we're very pleased with the process. We've got excellent appellate lawyers, and that will continue moving forward.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Rakita.
Sorry, I was muted. Justice means you find the truth of the matter. That's what you're supposed to do, and that's what is supposed to happen on criminal appeal as well. So sometimes you'll be aggressive to protect justice, to protect the truth that was found at the trial level. And other times you have to work with prosecutors to make sure you get to the truth. And that's important too, especially when it comes to pardons. We're in an era now of DNA evidence, and it could be exculpatory just like it could be inculpatory. And you have got to be able to recognize that when an innocent person has gone to jail. You know, so there's that, but that's discretion. It's a very powerful tool, and we have to use it appropriately, and you have to use it appropriately with prosecutors. And I trust our prosecutors to get the job, to get it right, and to help them enforce justice. But let us never forget, justice is about finding the truth of the matter, not imposing convictions to save face or anything else. And as your Attorney General, we'll make sure the Constitution is always followed first.
Great, thank you very much. Back to you, Laura.
All right. For the next question, we'll start with Mr. Harder. In the last legislative session, Senate Bill 446 was introduced, which called for the Attorney General's office to assume jurisdiction over the filing of certain criminal charges if the local prosecutor chooses not to. The question is, if a local prosecutor elects not to enforce a criminal statute, should the Attorney General's office be allowed to override that decision? And again, we start with Mr. Harder.
I serve on the legislative committee for the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and we across the board voted not to support that bill. And the reason for that is that each local community elects their prosecuting attorney to exercise their discretion, to exercise their judgment. And every 4 years, they're subject to being retained by that same group of people. And every community may have slightly different norms or preferences. For that reason, we as prosecutors were not interested in the idea of that discretion being overridden by an attorney general sitting in Indianapolis who is not subject to the same sorts of limitations on a regular basis. I am glad that that bill failed, and I hope that it is not revisited in the future. If it does, it won't be coming from my office.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hill.
I firmly believe in prosecutorial discretion at the local level, and so that particular bill was not well taken in my view. It was came about as a result of the Marion County prosecutor taking a position that he would wholesale not pursue a particular line of offenses, and I publicly addressed that issue indicating that the prosecutor was wrong in that particular instance, that prosecutors have discretion on individual cases on a case-by-case basis, but they cannot send a message to the community that they will disregard an entire area of law, particularly a law that's been enacted by the General Assembly as law. That's why that particular statute was there. It may be well-intended, but it violates the spirit of having the independence of a local prosecutor who is accountable to the people in that community for enforcement of the law. If the people in that community aren't happy with the overall position of the prosecutor, every 4 years they have an opportunity to change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rakita.
Right. So prosecutorial discretion exists for a reason, and that is because so many of these cases are so fact sensitive that it would be really unfair and really under our Indiana Constitution unconstitutional to substitute an elected official's judgment who's closer to the situation for another elected official. So it's this system is really there by design, and as your Attorney General, I'm going to work to uphold that system. Prosecutorial discretion means something. It means something important, and we have to respect it. And having experience as a statewide office holder for 2 terms, running an impeccable office under budget, I can tell you that there's enough for us to do. There's enough we can do in partnership with local elected officials. We don't need to be usurping each other's turf. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Westerkamp.
I'm not prepared to grow the size of government when we already have electorally accountable prosecuting attorneys that are closer to the people than the Attorney General is. The General Assembly made a legislative decision this last session to not give this authority to the Attorney General. The Attorney General is not a constitutional office under the Indiana Constitution. It's statutory base. So the General Assembly is the client. I respect their judgment. I think they came to the right conclusion because it would take a lot of time, resources, and manpower to make another branch of the Attorney General's office. And I'm not prepared to grow the size of government to do that when I think the county prosecutors are doing just fine. Thank you.
Great.
Ian.
Thank you. So we will start with Attorney General Hill. As the Chief Legal Officer of Indiana, the AG is often asked to render opinions on constitutional issues and other matters. How would you describe your legal philosophy? And please name the person and whom you are most influenced by. Your philosophy is most influenced, and maybe someone other than Anton Scalia, because I know he's very influential, but maybe someone other than him, because he tends to be a popular choice.
Well, thank you. The advisory opinions are a very important aspect of our office. And what we look for is the constitutional basis of the question and its impact on the state. We have them from a variety of resources. Usually they'll come from a representative of the legislature or state agency. Our purpose is to make sure that our opinion is solid on constitutional grounds. From that standpoint, the people I look to for influence is Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas recently was involved in one of our cases. We had a successful case in the Supreme Court involving fetal remains, and he wrote a dissenting opinion in that case that referred to the eugenics history of abortion that will, in all likelihood, serve as a future basis for the ultimate reversal of Roe v. Wade. He's got courage, stamina, and an independence that is important for all of us to follow and recognize.
Hey, Ann, can you repeat the question again, please?
Absolutely, it is a long one. As the Chief Legal Officer of Indiana, the AG is often asked to render opinions on constitutional issues and other matters. How would you describe your legal philosophy? And please name the person, other than Anton Scalia, who influenced your philosophy the most?
Well, in terms of advisory opinions, as the attorney for the General Assembly, I'll make sure they're well served, first of all. And you're well served by following the Constitution. You're well served by following the professional rules. And that's what I would do as the state's attorney. I would go right to the Federalist Papers. The federal, and a lot of these decisions and these advisory opinions are based on what the role of the federal government as it relates to our state. And that's pretty clear. That's the enumerated powers in our Constitution. And if it's not dealing with one of those powers, and those powers are reserved for the states or the individuals. And so that's what's going to direct me, the authors of the Federalist Papers. And that's the culture that we're going to have in our staff. And I will say Antonin Scalia. I've had the opportunity to visit with him on numerous occasions before his death. He's an excellent legal scholar, and deserves to. And his memories, his opinions, his thoughts deserve to be preserved, and they will be in my office.
Great, thank you. Mr. Westerkamp.
Yep. Antonin Scalia, I love him, and Neil Gorsuch, I love this question. They've both had the biggest impact on my understanding of the law, my interpretation of the law. I'm a proud originalist, which means I believe that the meaning of the law can be found in the reasonable understanding at the time the law was passed or ratified. So the 14th Amendment would have been during the Reconstruction era. Dictionaries at the time that the law was passed or the Constitution was ratified can be very helpful. But many times a page of history is worth a volume of logic. And so we need to be able to go back and to look at what the meaning of words meant at the time the law was passed. But there's no room in the Attorney General's office to put our own public policy preferences into an opinion. It should be the people's democratically accountable representatives, and the words that they passed, they should govern the opinion. And that's what I will do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Harder.
Well, look, I mean, all four of us are conservatives and limited government lawyers who are driven by the idea of using the text of the statutes as passed, and that would obviously inform my advisory division as well. So let me take it a slightly different direction. You asked about influences on our philosophy and judicial philosophy. And so I wanted to point back to 1942 to a case called Wickard v. Filburn that a lot of the lawyers might remember from law school as a negative influence on me that solidified me in my stance towards limited government. It was a bad decision that dramatically expanded the Interstate Commerce Clause and opened the entire United States up to overreach on a broad scale. And that confirmed in me my dedication to limited government. And I would love to see us roll that back and to roll back overreach more generally, hopefully, whether it's an advisory opinion or advising and counseling the legislature, we do some of that over the course of my 4 years.
Great. All right, Laura, you're up.
Thank you, Anne. For the next question, we will start with Mr. Rokita. And the question is, on March 23rd, 2020, as a result of COVID-19 sweeping across the country, Governor Holcomb signed Executive Order 20-08, the directive for Hoosiers to stay at home. This order restricted common, ordinary activity of Hoosiers that would otherwise be legal. The question is, was this order constitutional? Why or why not? Again, Mr. Rokita.
Right, thank you for that. You know, throughout America's history, we've had national emergencies declared where things like this executive order, that was really about the same as most of our states, were put into place. So there certainly is precedent for it. Does that mean your right to assembly, your right to free speech, or anything like that should stop when there's an emergency? And that is absolutely not. If you're an originalist, then you understand that these rights are God-given, number one, and two, they're made specifically to stand the test of time. So going forward, what you'd see me as your Attorney General do, if this, gosh forbid, ever came to us again, and maybe it will in terms of mutations and all that, we have got to be ready, got to be prepared, and got to implement safety smartly so that we better preserve our rights under our Constitution. I appreciate the hard position that our governor was in, for sure, that all our governors and that our president was in. But now that we have this experience, we have a duty to preserve liberty and educate on about the personal responsibilities that come with that.
Time's up.
And when you can do that, you can really make a difference and do it smartly, Laura. Thank you.
We are going to move on to Mr. Westerkamp.
Yes, our liberties don't end just because there's a national emergency. The General Assembly passed a statute, I think it was around 2001, that gave the governor emergency powers, and the governor under our Indiana Constitution has weak powers without legislation enabling him to do certain things. I think the General Assembly will probably, I've seen on social media, be reviewing ways to improve accountability with the emergency powers and the governor's role. I think a really important distinction needs to be made, though. A law can be constitutional on its face, but in application, it can be unconstitutional. So it's very difficult to say in all circumstances, at all times, something is or is not constitutional. So facts are important, and the facts of each case have a big impact on the outcome of each case. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Harder.
The statutes permit Eric Holcomb to do exactly what he did, and there's going to be litigation about whether those actions, although statutory, were in fact constitutional. Obviously, there are time, place, manner restrictions that are permitted under strict scrutiny here in this country if the government has a compelling state interest, imposes the least restrict means possible, and doesn't engage in content bias for engaging in those restrictions. That's probably going to be litigated. The question that we need to be asking is what the path forward looks like, because I think that Eric Holcomb and the governor deep down is trying to do the best he can with the tools he has. If we enter this next phase in a spirit of pointing fingers over who's to blame over the handling, we are going to be weaker as a people. What we need to do, and what I would hope to do as Attorney General, is to convene the legislators and the governor and whoever else they want at the table, business owners, faith leaders, to discuss a better structure for implementing checks and balances to make sure that no one person, especially someone who is more ill-motivated than the governor, could abuse those powers. I'd like to be part of that solution.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hill.
Well, there is no pandemic exception to the Constitution. And while there are statutory authorities given to the governor for an emergency, it's important to look at the issue of essential. That's going to be the word for the next foreseeable future. What's essential and who gets to decide? And we saw that play out with regard to religious liberty. We saw examples not in particular orders around the state. For example, in Allen County, I wrote a letter to the Allen County Health Commissioner who had issued an order banning church while only recommending gatherings at local stores to be inappropriate. We also wrote a letter to Mayor Hogshead, who had a similar issue, discriminating in our view with regard to religious gatherings versus other gatherings. That's the purpose of our office, to examine and understand where there is a potential constitutional problem and to step in and solve that problem. Pandemic.
All right, thank you. Ann?
All right, so let me get him. Sorry, he held out for a long time. Okay, so we're going to go into final remarks. You will have 90 seconds. We're going to start with Mr. Harder, start at the top again of the alphabet, and I'll let you know when you have 20 seconds left. Mr. Harder.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for staying and listening to what we have to say as we offer ourselves as candidates. What I hope to offer is a local elected official who's won multiple elections, who has managed an office and sat in the big chair that has to make tough decisions, from the charging decision to whether to proceed with a case or to plead it out, to hiring and firing decisions. Those are the kinds of decisions that I'm prepared to make as your Attorney General. I'm also the party chairman at the local level and a member of the State Central Committee, which has prepared me to understand and build on the party infrastructure, listening to you all, the locals, and also building a network and a movement across the state going into the fall. My experience as a courtroom trial lawyer will inform my ability to lead an agency that is primarily consisting of litigators who have to go to court and defend the state of Indiana, the legislature, and the governor, and will inform my advising of the governor and the legislators. If you haven't had the opportunity to decide to file a case, pick a jury, cross-examine and examine witnesses, object on the record, and deliver a closing argument, and then hope that that jury returns a verdict in your favor, then I don't know how, in the end, you are able to advise your litigators and your client agencies. For those reasons, I am prepared to be your next Attorney General, and I would love to earn your vote on the paper ballot that's coming to you June 22nd. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Attorney Hill, Attorney General Hill, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again for this forum. My name is Curtis Hill, and I am the Attorney General. Rather than engaging in rhetoric about what I'll do, or I'll do this or I'll do that in general, I can engage in a record. I have a record that's very deep in supporting our president. I've been to Washington on a number of occasions, working directly with the president and his staff on school safety, on criminal justice reform. I was there to defend him on impeachment. I have a record in pro-life, not just I'll be pro-life. We've demonstrated it by going into the state of Illinois and bringing back 2,411 aborted babies so that they could have a proper Indiana burial consistent with our sensibilities and our values here in Indiana. We have taken on the challenges that are necessary and established a strong, positive, hardworking AG's office. As we move forward, this is about establishing this office and this candidacy as a proven winner, as a proven conservative. In 2016, we established that by winning 1.6 million votes. That's the largest number of votes any candidate has had in the history of Indiana, and we will continue on that path. This is about having the strongest record and the strongest opportunity to continue to lead this office and the people in this state in our conservative values moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Rakita?
Thank you guys again, and I appreciate everyone's attention. Speaking to the delegates that are listening tonight, I'm running to provide some certainty in uncertain times. I've won twice statewide by large margins, even with libertarians on the ticket, something Curtis didn't have. The stakes are way too high this fall to put a fatally wounded candidate on the ballot, politically speaking. With Curtis on the ballot, we will have George Soros or those like him funding liberal candidates up and down the ticket in this state. I am tested, I am proven. I've won twice statewide, like I said. Also have a proven record when it comes to pro-life. No exceptions, 100%. 100% A rating on the Second Amendment. The only one with experience battling China, which we have got to do and you can do from this office. So I'm offering myself as a solution to this problem that we find ourselves in. A bad judgment occurred. When you're a statewide office holder, as I've been, you have to realize that the office is more than just you. It's representing the whole state. And bad judgment has to be owned and accounted for, and it wasn't here. I waited for due process to happen. When you're running for Attorney General, unlike some of these other guys, I wanted to make sure that a third-party impartial set of judges ruled, and they did unanimously. Let's make sure we have certainty this fall. Let's make sure we keep this office. There are too many cases coming through, and they're too important. I appreciate your support on the first ballot for Attorney General. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Westerkamp?
Thank you. I'm John Westerkamp. I'm a pro-life private sector conservative with real world experience. I represent Hoosier families and small businesses in my practice. I've seen them disproportionately affected by government overreach, and it's a perspective I want to bring to this office. At the core of my being, I believe that every person is made in the image of God and therefore deserves the protection of the state. And as long as any life is threatened, all life is threatened. And as Attorney General, I will fight relentlessly to roll back Roe versus Wade, which has absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution and is morally reprehensible. I'm not running because of any individual or to advance my own political career. I've been to every county in this state over the last year, meeting with you delegates, and I plan to continue to get back on the road as the time allows and as the law permits. Thank you so much for listening to that tonight. I'm John Westerkamp, and I'm asking for your vote at the convention. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. This has been so informative, and I really appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule. I know you're so busy, even though we have uncertain times. I know you're staying very busy, whether in your own practice or trying to meet virtually with other delegates. So thank you for giving Laura and I this time. We wanted to really wanted to connect you with our delegates, and I think you all four did a fabulous job. So thank you so much.
Yes, and Anne, I do want to thank you for organizing this forum. You put a lot of work into it, and we had to change the date, and thank you so much. And to the candidates, I thank you for participating. That you all participated shows the importance of the delegate votes. At the beginning, before we started, I did ask all of the candidates to just focus on what makes them best suited for the position, and most of you followed that and didn't attack others, so thank you for doing that. And we look forward to hearing from you again on June 18th when we hear the convention speeches, which will be live streamed on Wish TV starting at 5:30 p.m. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week. Take care.